Hey guys, Jason here. Now before we get to the video, I just want to tell you about a new show coming to the channel real soon starring all of you. TFX is starting a viewer mail segment featuring your questions and comments on any of our videos here at the channel. To be featured on the show, all you need is to be a subscriber to the channel and post an interesting question or comment, positive or negative, because yes, we will take the good with the bad. For instance, user uploading Enigma99 commented on our Avengers video, "Kill yourself, you idiot, you have no sense of humor. The shawarma scene was hilarious. 4 out of 5? Bitch, please, it's a 10 out of 5. Now that kind of comment, perfectly alright, because I can handle it. Why don't they like me? Leave Benny alone! I'll be fine. So be sure to subscribe, comment, and remember to check back here real soon to see if you're featured on a future episode. But now, on to the video. Hey, what's up guys? Jason here, and thanks for watching Terminal Effects. As you can see, I'm just hanging out doing my Spider-Man thing because I just got back from a midnight showing of The Amazing Spider-Man. Now, there are some spoilers coming up, but if you're looking for just a breakdown of the hidden ending, go ahead and check out the annotation below. Otherwise, here's our review of The Amazing Spider-Man. Man, these web shooters are awesome. Pew, pew, pew. Aw, son of a bitch. Since the early 2000s, it's been a great time to be a comic book fan. X-Men set the stage, but if there's really one film that took it to the next level and blew the doors wide open of what a real comic book movie could be, you gotta hand it to Sam Raimi's Spider-Man series. Now director Mark Webb, and yes, the irony of his last name does not escape me, reboots the franchise in a darker tone and freshens it up for a new generation. So is The Amazing Spider-Man a totally different experience? Well, not really. The start of the film sets up some pretty decent intrigue surrounding the disappearance of Peter's parents and is a glimpse into this side of his life that we didn't get before. The director's intent right off the bat is to set up the main theme of the story as a mystery of sorts that plays out through the rest of the film and no doubt on into the sequels. But from here, it pretty much picks up your typical Spider-Man timeline and walks you through the normal paces. You get a bullied Peter Parker at school, the awkward love interest, and your warm yet old-fashioned aunt and uncle, played by Martin Sheen and Sally Field. Where the first curveball comes in is the introduction of Peter's superpowers. It seems that the underlying thread running through the film is that Oscorp is behind much of the Spider-Man science we all know and love, with it being based around Richard Parker's research. Norman Osborn, who is never seen and is apparently on his deathbed, has enlisted Dr. Connors to try and produce some kind of a cure. This is where we see Peter come into contact with the infamous radioactive spider, and from here things really seem to kick into high gear, almost to the point where it seemed a bit rushed. He goes from nerdy teen to high-flying acrobat almost instantly without any real transition period. But since they had a lot of ground to cover, I suppose they couldn't really spend too much time here. Also, this is right about the time where we introduce the obligatory "let's shoot Uncle Ben" scene. Let's face it, we all knew it was coming, but actually, I was a little disappointed. Not that they did it wrong, it was done in the usual way with a random burglar that Peter refuses to stop, thus allowing Uncle Ben to die. I thought this was a good opportunity to change things up and maybe not kill Uncle Ben right away. It seemed that with the combined threat of what the Lizard would pose later in the film and the mystery surrounding his parents, this would be enough to push him into being Spider-Man. But it does play out as a moral theme later in the movie, so I suppose it was necessary. From here, we see Peter morph into full-on Spidey as he chases thugs around the city looking for his uncle's killer, and yes, in this version, he does build his web shooters, which angered some fans that Tobey Maguire didn't use any in the original. By this point, we've also seen Dr. Connors make his turn into full-on CG lizard monster after having to test the formula on himself. Now, this is usually the point where my eyes would gloss over and you'd lose me. I find anytime you introduce a completely CG character and expect me to connect with them in the same way I would a normal person, something gets lost in translation. Yeah, that's right, I'm looking at you, Avatar. But here, they kept my interest by transitioning between the CG lizard and actor Rhys Ifans. Ultimately, his plan is to turn the entire city into a race of superhuman lizard people, but as if you didn't see it coming, the final battle on the rooftop of Oscorp sees Spidey save the day in stopping the release of the toxin. Speaking of the new cast, there is something to be said for Andrew Garfield as the new Peter Parker, who I think captures the essence of the smart-ass teenager from the comics just a little better than Tobey Maguire did. It was also refreshing to see a different heroine besides Mary Jane, as we get Emma Stone playing Gwen Stacy. Dennis Leary, who I'm a huge fan of, fit the role of her father perfectly as he sets out to hunt down Spider-Man and is ultimately the one who gets killed in the end, making Peter promise to stay away from his daughter if he continues to fight crime. This, of course, is foreshadowing to an event later to come where, spoiler alert, Gwen Stacy is killed at the hands of Green Goblin, and Peter blames himself. The only other character who may play a role in a future Spidey flick is Flash Thompson, who's the high school bully who later comes to admire Spider-Man. The only reason I mention this is there's been a lot of talk about how the franchise will reintroduce Venom after leaving such a bad taste in our mouth from his last outing in Spider-Man 3. Now, in the comic series Secret Avengers, Flash does become a host for the Venom symbiote, but whether or not that storyline will play out is yet to be seen. After all, there is another villain that we all know Spidey is destined to tangle with at some point, which now leads me to Marvel's calling card, the hidden ending. We see Dr. Connors, now completely reverted back to human form, being led into a dark cell. A figure who stays in the shadows, presumably Norman Osborn, questions Dr. Connors as to whether or not he's told Peter the truth about his father. The scene ends with Dr. Connors telling him to leave Peter alone, but apparently the shadowy figure has, quote, special plans for him. Now, we've already touched on the fact that the film wanted a darker tone, taking many cues from Dark Knight, but you can also draw other comparisons as well. For instance, how it utilizes familiar characters. Both films set up a secondary villain in the first movie to orient the audience to the world, while saving the main attraction, in this case the Green Goblin, for the sequel, much as they did with the Joker in Dark Knight. It seems that's the new formula for reboots nowadays, and hey, who am I to argue because it seems to work pretty well. Despite being a bit CG heavy at times and a little too much Dawson's Creek, Mark Webb's film takes everything a comic fan loves about the world of Spider-Man and reintroduces it in a way that's edgy enough to appeal to just about everyone. It freshens up the franchise, but leaves you wanting just a little bit more with enough left over for a promising sequel. I can't wait to see where the franchise goes from here, but as for The Amazing Spider-Man, I'm giving it a 5 out of 5. Man, screens are expensive. That's like the third one this week. But anyway, that's our review of The Amazing Spider-Man. Now, there's only one other film that could possibly topple Marvel's Summer Empire, and that's Dark Knight Rises, which we will be reviewing coming up here real soon. So until then, I'm Jason, thanks for watching, and remember, if you enjoyed the video, be sure to hit the like button, and thanks again for subscribing to the channel. Stupid web shooters.